We began the show in the first hour talking about the awful story from Athens, Georgia, Laken Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student who had been at the University of Georgia prior to that. She was murdered allegedly by an illegal alien who had entered from Venezuela into the United States, been arrested a couple of times. Athens, which is in Clark County, Georgia, is a sanctuary city, and we are joined now by Mary Katharine Ham. She has a podcast, Getting Hammered, a part of the iHeart Podcast Network. She also writes at OutKick. She's kind of everywhere. She has a really, I think, powerful piece up at the top of OutKick.com right now. And Mary Katharine, you tweeted about this. We texted about it some over the weekend. This young 22-year-old who was murdered while going for a jog near a lake in Athens. You jogged there for basically every week when you were a college kid at Georgia. How did you respond to this story? How did you react to it emotionally? What has it felt like for you? And why do you think it matters so much and is connecting with so many people across the country?
A little bit more emotional for me because I look at her, I've seen her Instagram account, and I see what I was in college. She's running a half marathon with her best friend. She's going to tailgate. She's going to downtown, having a good time with her friends. And that life is gone. She doesn't get to live the life from college into a career and having a family that I have now, right? And when I look at her, I see a version of myself because I did run that path every single week. Our intramural lacrosse field was across the lake from where she was found, right? That's a place that felt very safe. And there's a reason it felt safe because for 30 years, there hasn't been a homicide on the University of Georgia campus. And then you get to the part where after I want to honor this poor woman's family and her friends, and they're having a memorial service on campus today for her, you get to the part about, okay, could this have been prevented? We're never going to prevent all violent crime, right? But this is a situation where Athens, Clark County, because of the DA there, because of the policies there, and our country, because of the federal policies, has become a magnet for illegal immigrants. And then the places that are sanctuary cities end up becoming a magnet for the more likely to offend, right? The people who have been arrested or who are likely to get arrested end up in these places because they're immediately let go. They don't have to pay a price for this. The guy who is suspected of this murder, he was arrested at least once in New York for endangering a child. He may have been arrested in Athens. His brother certainly was 2 or 3 times. And they don't have to worry about this endangering their asylum claims at all, right? Because under a Biden administration, you just go about your business. You do what you want to do until you escalate to this. And we have created this situation for ourselves. And in order to solve it, we have to at least be honest about it.
Mary Katharine, it's Buck. Thanks for being here with us. And,
Yeah.
For a lot of people, I think to hear that Athens, Georgia is a sanctuary jurisdiction is a little bit of a shock. Although if you look at the sanctuary jurisdictions across the country, there are over 300 of them. It's not just the major cities. It's really anywhere where there tends to be a concentration of Democrat power. And I'm wondering, to the degree you can see it, and I know you're connected into the community as an alumna, is there a sense that people might feel differently about Athens, Georgia as a sanctuary city or sanctuary jurisdiction going forward? I mean, what is the reaction of the community like right now?
Yeah, I think it might be jarring, particularly for parents of students that have been sent there, right? They didn't really anticipate this. Maybe they live somewhere else in Georgia that's not a sanctuary city or somewhere else in the country that's not, right? And they assume Georgia, that's probably fine. But the DA there has promised in running that she would treat illegal immigrants with kid gloves because the consideration is always, well, we have to think about how it might ruin their lives and their status once you hold them for a crime. Well, it's like, you're already here illegally. First of all, that's a crime. Second of all, why wouldn't you be on your best behavior since we've let you live in this country, right? But that's not the expectation at all. The expectation is that people like us and the DA should support protecting them once they've committed crime. Well, Laken Riley's life is now gone, partially as a result of just letting people out in these situations. And look, Buck, I used to be an immigration moderate, like someone would call a squish on this issue, and they have turned me into a hawk. because we are seeing the consequences of really bad policy. And it is the fundamental responsibility of governments to protect citizens from this kind of physical harm. They're generally not great at it because they're concentrating on a bunch of other things like protecting illegal immigrants, for one. And they failed. They failed over and over again. And if they keep failing, bad things will continue to happen. That does not mean every immigrant is likely to commit violent crime, but it does mean we have created a problem that we need to be honest about and solve.
Mary Catherine, I think you have 4 kids, if I'm not mistaken. I've got 3. When I read your piece and I read your tweets about this, we're somewhat in similar age. You at some point graduate as you age from the kid who goes to college and becomes an adult into what your parents were when they sent you off to college, right? That is desperately concerned about your kids more than you think about yourself. I would guess, knowing you a little bit, that you are on that pathway as I am. Can you imagine what it is like to lose a child? And to lose a child, not only, which has got to be, it's hard for any parent to even think about, but to lose one because of a violent act that's never been able to occur. And to me, you said you used to be kind of squishing on this. This is where I think a lot of parents feel it, right? You viscerally feel this. It's one thing if, your kid gets in a car accident and it's awful and you feel bad about it and you lose them that way. But what we're seeing happen is people who we know are murderers being let back out onto the streets and murdering, and people who should have never been here murdering. And it strikes and hits people, I think, in a way that is very different. And I think you're experiencing that. And I think most of our listeners are experiencing that. And that's why it connects so much, this Laken Riley story.
Yeah, no, it's criminal negligence, right? It is someone putting this poor woman, and by the way, a lot of other students on campus, in a position where they may be threatened, and doing it knowingly. The brother apparently had a job, who again has 3 arrests to his name, had a job in a dining hall. And by the way, an American who applied for that job would probably get vetted and they'd find that they had arrests and they'd be like, I don't know if you can work here. But an illegal immigrant has fake ID. His records don't pop. And so they're like, oh yeah, come on down and work. How is that a fair situation? And it puts all these students in a dangerous position who parents have trusted, by the way, paying a lot of money for it, into this university community. So yes, you have a right to worry about criminal negligence on the part of these people who seem to not care at all about Americans versus another class of non-citizens. That is a real thing. You see it in action all the time, and you're right to be mad about it and to be worried about your kids. I'm worried about a lot of threats to them, right? I want to be rational about it. But the thing about the immigration crisis and the crisis on the border is that the volume has become so great, the sheer numbers, that the likelihood of bad things happen naturally goes up, right? You just can't let in unvetted millions and millions and millions, 10,000 per day at some times, and think that you're not bringing in some folks who will commit these types of crimes, and to be worried about that. That is the right thing to do.
Mary Catherine, no other developed country has these same kinds of policies. Everyone else, at least at some level, I know Europe has waves of migration too, and illegal migration going on, but that cities would be thwarting the will of the federal government and federal law enforcement as a part of this. I think that the whole sanctuary jurisdiction mess, it's lawless, for one thing. You wouldn't have this if people were doing drug trafficking, but what is effectively a form of human trafficking, local law enforcement isn't able to get involved because you're dealing with illegals. And we saw this in New York City. The NYPD had this guy, and they released him before the detainer request could come in. And this is not a bug. This is a feature. They do this intentionally. They let them out as quickly as they can so that ICE can't get there in time to try to begin a procedure to remove them from the country. So, it's crazy, right? It's not just people say, oh, the system is failing. No, people are actively being told they should subvert the system. Americans are subverting this. Law enforcement subverting the system.
Right. No, we have incentivized lawlessness. And in the places where you incentivize lawlessness, New York is one of them, Athens, Clark County is one of them, you end up with more lawlessness because the people who are interested in breaking the law are very aware that they don't get prosecuted. They're very aware that they'll be let go, right? So they understand the game, and they're happy to take advantage of it. Meanwhile, law-abiding citizens are the ones who often pay the price. It's so shameful. It's so irresponsible. And, I'm cynical about government in general, but protecting your citizens is the number one thing you're supposed to do. And they're just taking a pass on it completely and, in fact, making it harder to live safely in your city.
Last question for you, Mary Katharine. Some people would say, okay, violence can happen anywhere to anybody. Why is this a story? Why is this being turned into a politically connected story?
Right.
How would you respond? And I'm just kind of curious, building on that, I'm sure you're on a lot of text chains with Georgia grads and Georgia-connected people. That is the University of Georgia. What is the general consensus among the Bulldog Nation at this point?
I think people react emotionally to stories, to human stories. So I think, look, sometimes things do become lightning rods and it becomes a political story and you go like, okay, well, why is so much emphasis on this one story? Sometimes it's media complicity. In this case, it's not, because they don't really want to talk about this. This one is responding to the fact that people are emotional about this. Among Georgia grads, I would say that even people who are not right of center, left of center, center right folks have been posting about it, of course. Texting me about it. So I think it has more reach. A guy on Twitter, I guess a troll the other day, said to me, hey, a lot of citizens kill people too. So are you scared of them? And I was like, well, I'm generally scared of all murderers. Yes. But also, here's the point. Like, the question is, at what point is violent crime preventable? And with every violent crime perpetrated by somebody who's in the country illegally, it could have been prevented if the law had been enforced at that first point. It could have been prevented the second time they were arrested, the third time they were arrested, right? Those things matter, and we should actually be trying to prevent these random crimes from happening.
Outstanding stuff as always, Mary Katharine Ham. She's got a great story up at OutKick. You can check it out. Thanks for the good work, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon, Mary Katharine.
Thank you very much, guys.
She is, that piece I think will connect with a lot of moms and dads out there. And, the reason I think Laken Riley is connecting with so many people is because you can go look at her Instagram page. It's still public, Buck. And she is as close to what I would say is the average girl who is attending an SEC school as can exist. And I'm saying that in a very positive way. This could have been your granddaughter. This could have been your daughter. This has to be rectified. And Biden's going to the border on Thursday. It's amazing how often he comments on stories that are out there that they want to make into a narrative. Didn't say anything about this at all. In my opinion, he's got blood on his hands.